Good morning, everyone. I call to order this regular meeting of Council for Tuesday, November 7th, 2023. And I'll look to Councillor Ma to provide the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Your Worship. I remember back when I was studying at U of C in Mac Hall, which had the most revolting food court, a company would set up for a whole week each semester, and they would sell posters. So you could have, put up nice posters in your room. And one of my favorite posters showed an Indigenous elder, and it described the seventh generation principle, which is an Iroquois philosophy. And the seventh generation principle implores that the decisions we make today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations down the road. And so how long is 7 generations? About 150 years. So this visionary Iroquois mindset was first recorded in about 1500 AD, so about 500 years ago, which is amazing. Because in our current world, that's quite the juxtaposition, where things are driven by financial quarters and short-term gain for long-term pain. So for these Indigenous elders have the courage and foresight to look 7 generations, 150 years ahead, is quite visionary. So whether it's this week's agenda regarding the Palliser ASP or other impactful decisions ahead of our council, it's a sobering thought to contemplate how the decisions we make today could affect the Canmore of 2175. So with that, I would like to say that I am fortunate and grateful to live vibrantly on the land of the Treaty 7 people, the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Yahe Nakota Nations, Chiniki, Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Métis Nation District 4. In the spirit of change, I am committed to seeking truth and reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ma. We'll now turn to the agenda. There's one thing that I wanted to add, item H4, add H4, and that is an item called Advocacy regarding housing debt. And looking to see if there are any other changes. None. So I'll move approval of the agenda for the November 7th, 2023 regular meeting of Council as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we will move to our delegation. Ms. Rogers, you're going to do the introductions. Just one second here. I'm wondering, is that plugged in? No.
It's a prop. Good eye, sir.
Jump into action there, Makai. Is it green for you?
Okay.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, so just a note, we did have all of the microphones taken down for our Finance Committee, and they're going to be put down. Bear with me, they're not hooked up right.
Okay.
For example, if I hit the CEO's, it turns on the second one, and if I hit Manager 3, it turns on the Clerk.
Okay.
So let me just see here. That seems to work. Open mode? No.
Oh, that sounds like chaos.
Okay, all of the
Have you met me?
all of the councillors' mics are correct. So now we're set up. Thank you for the quick repair. Ms. Rogers, you're here to introduce our delegation.
I am. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to introduce Yossi Fixler, who's the principal with Goodform Management, and also Gibson Rents, who is here from Canmore with PICA. They will present to you, and there will be question and answer period after. I will try to support if there are questions that are administrative in nature, but we may not have all the answers on the spot, so I'll leave it over to Yossi Fixler.
Great. Mr. Fixler, Mr. Renz, welcome to Council.
Thank you.
The microphone is yours. Just so you know, we are live streaming, and so in order to be heard, you do have to speak into the microphone, and appreciate you being here today. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The last time I attended a council meeting was for another apartment project called View. This was a project we completed a couple of years ago on Kananaskis Way quite successfully. That project required some town support. In that case, it was in the form of a land use change, which was approved. I'm here today to ask for a different kind of support in the form of a property tax exemption. There's really 3 points I'd like to make today, really key takeaways. The first is that obviously there's a need for rental housing in Canmore. The second is some of the challenges we face building rental housing in this market. And then lastly, the urgency around our request for a property tax exemption. So to start with respect to the need for rental housing, it's been well studied and well understood. I know councils, well, probably better educated on it than I am. We see it practically at View. That building is 159 units. It's the largest rental project in town, and it's been leased effectively every day since we finished. We've had a wait list effectively since we finished, and we've been looking for more sites to build another rental, and 900 Railway Avenue is that site for us. I think at this point it's safe to say the need for rental housing is obvious, so I won't dwell on that point. The second point is really around the challenges we face building rentals. So since we completed View, the market's become more challenging. With inflation, we've seen our construction costs go up dramatically. Our costs have gone up 6% year to date, which is, unbelievable. At least it was when we started the project. We've seen interest rates increase, which has increased our cost of capital, and it's a long way of saying it's reduced our profitability. It sort of begs the question, why hasn't more rental been built in Canmore, notwithstanding the challenges when there's so much demand? And the answer to that question is a simple one, which is condos are far more profitable to build than apartments. And we're really developing at the margins. So by way of example, pre-sale condos are selling for over $1,000 a square foot. So for a 600 square foot one bedroom, you're looking at a $600,000 sale price. Apartments in Canmore of a similar size and a similar quality have a value of half that number. So we're in a position where our land costs are the same, our construction costs are the same, but the value at completion is far lower than condos. It's simply not highest and best use. That sort of begs the second question, which is, why are we building rental? And the answer to that is that we take a more holistic view of development. We're not solely profit driven. We do have a profit requirement and a threshold we need to meet, but it's not all that we look at when we develop. We're fortunate to have investors that are like-minded in this way. Our key investors were born and raised in Canmore and are prepared to make a long-term investment in exchange for what would otherwise be short-term gain. But with the challenges we face and just the economics of the project, we're here to ask for this exemption. I'll share a little bit about the project briefly. So in terms of location, we are located behind the Nutters and Home Hardware.
Excuse me, Mr. Fixler.
Sure.
I'm terribly sorry. We're just going to take a very quick break, if we could stop the clock, so that Councillor Mara can clear her throat. I don't want her to suffer. She's suffering. She's suffering.
Yeah.
So, yeah. My apologies.
All good.
Oh, yeah, it's yeah.
So anyway, some residents out there just bounced around through a couple of the store and carried on. So when I got back, so Gibson, are you driving on 17th Street? And I'm like, yeah, it's delivery there. She's like, you by chance take a shortcut through the trees? I was like, yeah. She's like, somebody noticed.
Thank you for your, thank you for your patience.
Okay.
Tell us about your project.
Location. Located behind Nutter's and Home Hardware, adjacent to the courthouse and backing onto the railway. Well, this is what the site looks like now. It's a gravel lot. It's been a parking lot at times for the town and been vacant for many, many years. And here is what we're approved for. So 59 apartment units, a mix of one-bedroom units and two-bedroom units, 1,300 square feet of amenity retail on the main floor, ample bike parking. I'll pull up a site plan to show the connectivity for walking and cycling. Something that this doesn't show is that this project will be exceptionally energy efficient. So 40% less energy consumption and greenhouse gases than a typical apartment project. Something we're really excited about. Here's a rendering of the exterior. So what this doesn't show is the solar panel array on the roof. It does show our amenity retail on the front corner. And you can barely make out the crosswalk that will connect to a future walking and bike path. This is a design we're pretty excited about. This took many months to design, and we'll start construction early in the new year. A couple of other things to point out just from the tenant's perspective. You'll see on the upper left the penthouse patio. That is a common patio to the tenants. There's an indoor lounge inside with co-working style space and entertaining space. There's a fitness center on the second floor above a main floor parkade. Very quickly, this is our site plan. You can see the crosswalk. I'm not sure if the pointer will work, but the crosswalk connecting the main entrance to a future bike lane that hopefully will come together on the courthouse lands. If not, it'll be behind our building. We've committed that land for that purpose. And of course, our parkade with ample bike parking. I'm happy to answer any questions about the project itself. My final point I'd like to make is this, and this is with respect to the urgency of our request. So we've applied for rental financing with CMHC, and they're currently underwriting it, and they'll lock in our loan amount over the next few days. The way they determine our loan amount is largely based on the future net income of the property. By reducing the property taxes through this exemption, it unlocks about $500,000 of funding for this project, which improves the viability of it. We are operating at the margins right now, and every little bit helps. So from a timing perspective, we're hopeful we can have a decision on this matter today. You know, in other words, for every dollar of property tax savings, it unlocks about $20 of funding for our project. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
That's quite the bump, being able to take a small bit and get a lot of credit for it, so that's good. Thank you for your presentation. So just to the urgency, you mentioned that it has to do with your CMHC financing. Our normal practice is to deal with delegation requests at the next council meeting. What would happen if that was, if that's the way that we had proceeded?
It'd be too late to get the funding bump. Our loan amount would be locked in, and we'd get the benefit of the exemption from a cash flow perspective going forward, but we wouldn't get the funding bump from CMHC.
Okay. And what would that mean for the project?
It just puts it further at the margin. It's just tighter than it is already.
Okay. If it doesn't proceed today, and I'll just let you know and let some of the council know, Section 34 of our procedural bylaw allows an exception to dealing with things a month out. So after we've done asking questions, I will put it to council whether or not they would like to deal with this matter today. Because it's an exception, it needs a 2/3 majority, so we would need to have 5 out of 7 support us or support the request. And then there would be the motion made if we go today. If not, it would be in a month. Yeah. Would you, if we didn't proceed today, would you still be requesting this this exemption?
Yeah, I mean, yes is the short answer, but it wouldn't have the impact we were hoping for.
Right.
Yeah.
With regards to the length of the exemption, when I've talked with you before and when I've taken a look at other incentives provided by other municipalities to incentivize purpose-built rental, it's not unusual for a municipal tax exemption for a period of time.
Yeah.
When we had talked previously, it would be often like the term of the first term of the loan.
Yeah.
Right. Now I see though in your letter that you're looking for an exemption for as long as they remain rental property, you know, and the rental properties meaning that it's to Canmore residents, long-term leases. Can you speak to the length of time that is requested in the letter versus what my understanding is from other scenarios where it's more of a fixed period of time?
Sure. So the mortgage term we've applied for is a 10-year term. Okay. So that would be the minimum length we'd need for financing purposes for an exemption. The request contemplates an indefinite exemption on the basis that we'd continue keeping the property as rental over the long term. When that mortgage comes up for renewal, that benefit continues and the rental continues, hopefully for the life of the building. That's the intent.
Okay, thank you. Looking to council, Councillor Faubert.
Thank you so much for your presentation today. Have you requested this type of exemption in other jurisdictions before? And do they exist in other locations?
I have not, but they do exist
They do, yeah.
elsewhere. And the value in them is that they're recurring. Like there's more value in a recurring incentive versus a one-time, which is why they've been used in other municipalities.
Are there other types of incentives that would be worth considering that would also benefit the project that might not be a tax exemption?
Yeah, this project, we're too far along to consider other incentives. I have shared my thoughts on a broader incentive scheme that I understand the town's considering that includes extra density, relaxations, and so on. But in this instance, because we've already got a development permit, we can't go back and redesign the building. A tax incentive is all we have to work with.
Awesome. I have one more.
Yep, please go ahead.
Would you be willing to guarantee that all residents that you rent to are employed in Canmore in exchange for this exemption?
Yeah. So we've committed to 95% of residents being long-term, and employed here. The employment one's tough. So at View, we have, the vast majority of our tenants, virtually all of them are true Canmore residents. They live and work here. We have quite a number of retirees. We wouldn't want to exclude any groups on the basis of employment, but the commitment is that it's people who truly live in this community, not people commuting.
Yeah. The one trend I'm concerned about that I think they've seen in Whistler is that rental units going to people or groups sharing them as a vacation property to come and use from Vancouver, like a timeshare. So that's kind of like, I'm just trying to predict into the future some scenarios that I want to avoid that exist in other resort.
So we don't allow that kind of use under our leases. All of our leases are 12-month terms, no subleasing, no short-term leasing, no vacation homes. Like they're intended for people living.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you for the presentation. So just to look at different scenarios, if this tax exemption wasn't approved, what changes would we see from the building? Would there be big changes right now? Like, would you just decide to go straight to the condos? Or, because if you've already are working with CMHC, I'm assuming that's for rental properties. So, and it doesn't sound like they'd pull their funding, it would just lower their funding. So I'm just trying to see exactly if we give this, because like, again, you've kind of stated that the benefit or the commitment that you're committing to is kind of how you do business every day anyway. So I'm not seeing the real change. Like that's how you do business, which is great. I don't see how that, the exchange, because you're putting it as an exchange for the commit to the town is to do the 95% to Canmore residents and to enforce a minimum 12-month lease, but that sounds kind of like how you just operate as it is, which is awesome. So to me, like, is there going to be, is with the CMHC loan, is there anything tied to rental, like it has to be 10% below market, or any other factors that any other benefits that the residents and the town would be getting?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I think your first question is, what's the consequence in the absence of a tax exemption? So we're not trying to bridge the gap between apartment profitability and condos because it's impossible. We're trying to justify rental financially. I'm not going to stand here and say that for sure we'll build condos if we don't get the exemption, because it's not our business. It's also not what we set out to do when we designed this project. That said, we can't build a project that doesn't have, even a sufficient return for the risk that we're taking, and we're operating at that margin today. Your second question was around the benefit to the town, And while this project doesn't have an affordability component specifically, I'd suggest that all new inventory helps with affordability in town. The energy savings that we're building into this project are long-term savings for the town, which we think are meaningful and unprecedented, according to our consultant in Alberta. So we're pretty excited about that. Like the way we view it is like it's an investment in the long-term and the long-term viability of this town in a way. In the absence of rental housing, there's such a gap. Employers are struggling to find long-term employees. Like I don't want to repeat all the stories from the newspaper. I think we're all well aware. Like there's such an obvious need, and we'd like to meet it.
Thank you.
I have a question. This is perhaps for Ms. Rogers. The estimated property tax exemption noted in the letter is $23,000 per year, and I just want to make sure that that's A, accurate, and B, only the municipal portion, because of course we can't exempt the education portion.
Correct. It's somewhat difficult to assess what the property tax will actually be until a building is built and we do the annual assessment process. This estimate seems reasonable based on the calculations that we looked at. I have your cough now. Sorry.
Maybe it's as dry as a desert in here.
It is very dry. And yes, it would be for the municipal portion only. We are unable, or council is unable to exempt the education portion and also the requisition. So it is the municipal property tax portion only.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor McCallum, you have a question for the delegate.
I do. And thank you for coming to council again. I think I saw you 5 years ago when you were here before, only you didn't have this.
More hair too.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful project. I do have some questions. And, we have the benefit of looking back at the view, which is 100% occupied. My kids have friends who lives in there. But, one of the, when you opened the building, or when a management company opened the building, the rents were higher than people were used to because it was new residential stock, and people aren't used to new residential stock and what the cost of that is. And then during the pandemic, we really saw those rates really jack. And we saw a lot of people in their house that didn't need to live in Canmore. Their job was actually somewhere else, but they could bring their laptop with them wherever they went. And essentially, if they had a driver's license that says Canmore on it, they're a Canmore resident, but they're not actually doing what we need them to do, which is take jobs here in Canmore. So, articulating those two challenges that we see come out of your building, how will this project address that? And when you talk about 40% lower than typical project, are you talking about your typical project from 2018, the view?
Okay, so 3 questions, maybe in reverse order.
Sure.
So energy savings are based on National Energy Code. So this is like baseline building code requirements versus what we're building, not view specifically. And we do have engineering reports, we're happy to share. With respect to the residency, that hasn't been our experience, that there's people who, or at least a significant number of tenants, who are using View as a home base to work elsewhere. We track it as best we can, and the feedback I get from our property manager is that it's almost 100% people who are in Canmore. To be candid, when we built the project, we thought there might be more people doing that, and people from Calgary renting to come in on the weekends, and we didn't have that constraint, so we thought we'd see what happens. But the demand is coming from people who live and work here, as far as we know through our property manager. With respect to affordability, it's a tougher one. So View is actually technically an affordable project. Believe it or not, those rents are 10% below market and held that way for 10 years under our financing. We didn't advertise it as such because we're sensitive to the label of affordable. In any event, that program with CMHC no longer exists. So part of the reason why we pursued energy savings in this case is because we were able to unlock similar funding through a different path. So it's a trade-off we've made and in some ways had to make due to the availability of funding. So we can't do it all, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. What I will say is that the addition of any rental units in Canmore, I think is meaningful. The rental inventory is extremely low on a per capita basis by almost any measure, and we're of the view that every bit helps. My last comment on this is this. We hope this can be a signal to rental developers that this is something Canmore will prioritize going forward. We are working with other landowners in town right now on other rental sites, and we'd like to see the viability improve over time so there can be a sufficient number of apartments and eventually stabilize those rates. That's our long-term goal, but we'll see what the market will bear.
Yeah, build and hold if you're not a REIT is a real difficult model to justify, especially for small D developers.
Yeah.
And, pardon me? Oh, sorry, it was actually on, I just wasn't eating it. Yeah, so small rental, build and hold is a difficult model for small D developers. And we see that, with some of our current developers that are trying to build staff accommodation and staff housing, and the bank's not used to dealing with them when they're actually holding on to it. They're used to them building condos and selling them off. I guess I just, one other question that you may not know the answer to, and that was just in response to that your $1 of tax reduction sort of unlocks $20 worth of funding.
Yeah.
And so what does $1 property tax unlock in terms of how many dollars of affordability for my residents? How does that work? That's got to work on the reverse for the customer, for the person renting the unit.
I'm not sure how to answer that question. So I think we're probably coming at it from two different angles, perhaps. Like, it's not, that $1 of tax savings, I think on a per unit basis, it's in my letter, I don't have it in front of me, it's something like $30 a month or whatever.
$32, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, from a rent savings perspective, I'll suggest $32 probably doesn't move the needle for most people. But the fact that it unlocks the housing itself is meaningful.
I might have another question, but I'll leave it to my colleagues. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Graham?
Thank you. And thank you for bringing this project and this idea to us today. I'm curious about a couple of things. We've seen in other projects that the town has give incentives to, that those units or those projects were moved to future owners or different owners. And I'm wondering about your long-term plans to hold this property or otherwise.
So our plan's to hold it for at least 10 years. Our financing is designed that way. We're building to hold, and part of that is to hopefully capture some of the return we left on the table by not doing condos. All of our investors are committed to that. Things change, buildings sell, but we're going in with the long term in mind.
Okay. One more question for you, and kind of along Councillor Fulbert's. Did you ever look at what would if parking requirements were different?
Yeah.
What would that have done to your project?
A really good question. So,
and I know you can't, you're already deep in the design phase, but
yeah.
So
a couple of things come to mind. So the first is that this project actually used to be 62 units, and I think 65 at one point. And through feedback from planning and the design process, we lost units primarily due to parking. We were prepared to
Right.
build a few units with lower than typical parking allocation. So a reduced parking requirement could, in theory, unlock some density. In practice, however, we found that we really need one stall per unit. Like, as much as we focus on, cycling and pedestrian connectivity and so on, our tenants have vehicles, and I think it'll be some time before there will be more tenants that don't need vehicles. We look forward to that day. Like, building parking is costly in so many ways, but our tenants aren't there yet.
Yeah, I think, your location really lends itself to walkability. Personally, I think that if we were to move in a direction of fewer parking requirements, that, that does lend to affordability on the project, it does lead to density. And I believe that there are people out there that would appreciate all of those aspects. I am for, hypothetically speaking, of course, we don't have that policy in front of us right now, but yeah.
Yeah, we are looking at other sites right now that are as walkable as this one, and we're hoping that come next year, some of the incentive ideas that we've proposed, including flexibility on parking, will be implemented so we can look at it. We're a little early to this in a way, as we were with View, but our intent is to continue building rental in town.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate bringing this to us.
So just on that, as our delegation here knows, the Livability Task Force, of course, is looking at potential ways to incentivize purpose-built rental. And things that are being considered within that are the densification, which includes height and size of units, parking, as well as tax incentives. And so, yes, if this was a year from now, we would likely have a policy. You would know what that was. Others that were building would know what that was. You could start to plan with that in mind. So I do appreciate that this is coming to us at this time, because it's needed now, and it isn't something that you can wait for. Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you. So you cited that it'd be about a $20 to $1 exchange for that bump. Now, if we were just doing a one-year tax exemption, I would agree. But if we are doing, say, a 10-year, most likely it's probably more close to 2 to 1, just because over 10 years it'd be about $230,000 plus in taxes. With the CMHC debt, if we were to only, say, for this year, just do a 1 year, would that still help bump, or do you need the longer term to get an increased bump? Like, how does that work? Like, if we just so we can, because again, if it's, you need a 10-year one to match the thing, and then that gives you the 500,000 bump, that's one thing. And if we do a shorter term, just to basically so that we can, come back with a tax when we have an actual policy in place, where if we do something short term now and then you can reapply later, just trying to see how that would affect.
So it needs to be a recurring exemption to get the bump. Otherwise, CMHC doesn't take it into account, because it has to improve income on a recurring basis. So the minimum would be the term of the loan. In this case, that's 10 years.
Thank you.
Councillor Faubert.
Thank you again. What about a partial exemption? Would that still unlock the funding?
Yes, is the short answer. We sort of view it as a partial exemption anyway, because there's the provincial component, of course, but any recurring savings is helpful.
Okay, awesome. And then, yeah,
Councillor
that's
Faubert,
good for
go
me.
ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, well, I wanted to ask a question of administration.
Yes,
Is that okay?
absolutely.
Does administration have any concerns around this request or a decision being made today on this, or any concerns about potential risks or unintended consequences about, given the fact that we are working on this as part of the task force?
Not directly, given that this is the direction the task force is exploring, It is a common approach in other municipalities. Kelowna, as an example, has quite a robust program to incentivize purpose-built rental that's based on this type of foundation. We still need to figure out the mechanics, which is difficult for us to do until we have direction from council. But it is the direction, I would say, that the task force was tasked with exploring. It is one of the few ways that purpose-built rental can be incentivized. What's common in other municipalities that have a different setup than ours is working with land and developers who want to build purpose-built rental. And as you all know, that's really limited for us. So it really shrinks the options that we have. And then, as the mayor mentioned, density and Councillor Graham, density parking, built form and so on are other ways that we can try to advance this. But there are limited tools in the toolbox, and this is a common one. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Good question. I actually wanted to, no, not you, Ms. Rogers, but Mr. Fixler, I want to pick up on Councillor Faubert's question about partial. I mean, at what point is it not helpful? Like if we, according to your bump scenario, if we went, exempting 50% of the municipal portion, that presumably creates a bump of about $250,000 instead of the $500,000 over the life. Sure. Is that in the range that this is helpful, or is it in the range of, it doesn't really move the needle?
Yeah, I'm reluctant to say no, because every bit helps, but a full exemption is, like, we requested it because we feel it's necessary. Right. Is probably the best way I could answer that question.
I just had this feeling like we're on Dragon's Den. And you've come with an offer of so much valuation for a percentage of your company, and now we're exploring other scenarios. Sorry, there's no question there. It's just all of a sudden I had this weird feeling that
I'm on the hot seat.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Mero.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and for bringing this important project forward. And I apologize for interrupting your presentation. I just had one question. A couple of mine have been answered. And maybe this is more for Mr. Renz. What is your mechanism to guarantee or to make sure that you have 95% are Canmore residents?
I mean, we leave that to our property manager. They vet our tenants. My understanding is that there's an interview process when we screen new tenants, and so part of that is asking them, where they live, where they work, and so on. So it's just part of kind of the standard leasing program that we have.
So they would already have to live in Canmore, or could they be someone coming in, moving in, and they'd have to show proof of that?
Either one's acceptable, so long as they truly live here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for bringing the project forward. There's a lot of interesting things about it. A couple questions, Mr. Fixler. Would there be an appetite to tighten up some of the criteria of what a Canmore resident is? The remote worker piece, I think that is a trend that's only going to increase over time. And I do, as Councillor McCallum said, it would be great if even a portion we go for a tighter definition to make sure that the jobs that we have in our community are being serviced by people in this building.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we'd be open to it. I guess my only comment would be that it's practical. Like, I have spoken with our property manager about this. Like, what does, the most sort of stringent protocol look like? What would that do in terms of management and so on? And their feedback consistently has been that, it can create administrative work of no value. And so, yes is the short answer. We're open to it, so long as it sort of meets a balance between administrative requirements and running an apartment building.
Yeah, sure. I hear that, and I'm just saying that it's important to me too that this project, which I really like, is also hitting the audience I'm hoping for. Perhaps this is a question for the gentleman from PICA. When you guys look at the criteria, is that done every time the 12-month lease is finished? Do you reevaluate, or is it the sort of thing they do it once and then it just kind of rolls along? Mm-hmm.
I guess I should clarify, Councillor Ma. I'm here as, PECA representative, but I'm also one of the equity partners in the project.
Oh,
And so I'm actually not on the rental side, even though our company is known for rental.
Okay.
I don't actually handle any of the reoccurring leases.
okay, sorry, I made that assumption. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. So actually, Mr. Fixler knows that more than I, because he deals with my partner, Mark Walker, who
Okay.
actually is on the rental side of things.
Okay, all right, thank you. I didn't know where your part there was. Okay, let's bounce that back to Mr. Fixler. There's a pretty fast ask for November 7th today. Is that the actual drop dead date? Like, we had an extra day or two? I'm
Oh,
curious.
a day or
what-
two would be fine.
Okay.
And there isn't a specific drop dead date, but we know through our contact with CMHC that they'll be locking in our funding in the next, week or so, we think. They
Yeah.
don't actually tell you. It sort of goes.
Yeah, like I get the sense of urgency.
Yeah.
I was just trying to understand that piece.
Yeah.
And have you had any discussions with like CCH about any sort of collaboration pieces?
We haven't on this project. It was something we considered. We were hoping to have an affordability component like we did at View, but in this circumstance, with the way the funding changed, it just wasn't an opportunity in this case. But we hope to work with them in the future. There's enough overlap there where we'd like to find a way.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, sure.
Councillor Ma, I would just suggest we need council to make a decision about, so a day or two would require calling a special meeting to get, so I just wanted to clarify that piece. Maybe it was clear, I don't know. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Graham?
A couple, I don't know where this question might go, but have we seen other requests like this as of late? And the Mayor, maybe you could shed some light on this. Are we seeing more of this come across our desk?
Not here, but it's not an uncommon request in other places where they've incentivized purpose-built rentals.
Sure.
What I expect is that a community puts in place a policy and then you see it coming forward because you're actually seeing response. Here we have somebody that was already planning to do purpose-built rental, but due to a variety of factors, it's becoming more and more tenuous, and this is a proactive request in order to make it remain feasible. But what I would hope to see is that when we put in a policy, we'll actually have a number of different parties saying, okay, now I can build purpose-built rental based on these sorts of things.
That also concerns me that if we do make a decision like this today, ahead of what the Livability Task Force wants to recommend, are we inviting more of that kind of cart before the horse?
You know, well, that's always possible when we're giving the timing involved and how long it takes projects to go. I suspect that we'll have a policy in place based on the recommendations, or at least the recommendations received well before we receive any other requests.
But I know when I've done rental pro forma projections, I've had forecasts of what my rental increases may or may not be into the future. And I'm wondering what your pro forma is projecting for rental increases over the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, we actually don't focus on projections all that much for a couple of reasons. First is it's such a small inventory here. It's difficult to predict rents. We have looked at rents historically, though, primarily through the, what's that report that comes out? The name escapes me at the moment, but there's a quarterly report that comes out with rents. And we've seen rents increase sort of 5 to 6% per year for the last decade or so. And we expect that to continue without new inventory. So it's the best way I can answer your question. I'm just thinking through our pro forma and how we went about it. We really look at it at 2 points in time. At completion, once the building's full, what's that value? That's what our lender looks at. And then, a sale in year 11 on a notional basis. And we'll just use the historical rental inflation to come up with that number, if that makes sense.
So if council was to put terms on this, such as a limit on annual rental increases, how would that affect your project?
It wouldn't work. So the project needs to be effectively a market project for our lenders to approach it that way, and for the financing we've applied for. Any constraints on revenue growth adds risk to the project and results in worse lending terms. We're also faced with inflation on the expense side. So notwithstanding that rents are going up, X% a year, for the last few years, expenses have matched it. So our net income, on a projected basis would remain flat. So it's sort of a long way of saying that it just wouldn't work from a financing perspective if we had a cap in this instance.
Thank you very much.
Looking to see if there are any other questions of council. Checking my notes as well. Councillor McCallum.
I just have a question to the chair. I am getting the impression that council's got different ideas and different thinkings, and I'm wondering if council could be permitted the privilege of being able to defer the decision to later in the meeting, perhaps at least after the break, maybe to the end of the meeting, so that if anybody has any motions or any thoughts or anything, big thoughts.
I was actually kind of thinking the same thing. What we'll do is we will still, after this allegation is done, we'll still have the motion as to whether we wish to proceed today or not.
Right.
And if that is in the affirmative by a 2/3 vote, then I will motion that we table it to the last item of the day.
Awesome, thanks. That was my.
Okay?
Perfect. Yep.
Yeah, because that will give us, because I'm sitting here making tons of notes.
Yeah, I
going,
know, and-
What the heck would this motion potentially be if it's approved in order to be ready? And I'm thinking I would need at least the lunch hour to do some wordsmithing.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then I just had one question, thank you.
Or the break, anyway.
Yes, because I think our meeting is
Yeah.
meant to be done before noon.
That's right.
And this is sort of the trickiness of when you come with a request where you want an answer right away, because we have time to chew things over a bit more. So I think I understood, and you could just confirm for me, that the CMHC funding that you're receiving, the loan rather, requires you, it's a 10-year payback, and it requires you to keep it rental for 10 years. Is that correct?
Yes, unless it's paid out. Like, it's possible we could sell the building and it'd be paid out.
Paid
but
out.
It's a 10-year loan with a big penalty. CMHC doesn't like to see them paid out, so 10 years is what
Oh, there's a big penalty at the end if you paid out
if you
early.
paid out early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to municipal government. That's how it works for us, too.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, good questions. Any other questions? Mr. Fixler, Mr. Renz, you've obviously brought something that has triggered a lot of questions, a lot of interest. I hope you see that we are really considering what this might look like. And so let's see where it goes with some motions today. And of course, you're happy to stick around, or you can find out from Ms. Rogers afterwards how it went, whatever is your pleasure. So once again, thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the community with regards to providing rental opportunities for our residents.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present today, and we look forward to your decision.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move, and I'll just make sure I'm liaising here with Ms. Hyde here. So my motion is going to be to add this request for consideration at today's meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the procedural bylaw. So once again, I am moving that this, okay, I guess that, move to add this request for consideration at today's meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the procedural bylaw. All right? So that's being the motion. We need 2/3 majority. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? I think it's debatable. Councillor McCallum? Or?
Hit that button.
Such a sucker. So I would, so, you know, we are faced with decisions every day, or every week rather, that don't necessarily align with the timing that we have in our minds. And someone like me who's a little OCD, it's kind of irritating, I get that. But I think that with housing being our #1 challenge in our community, that it behooves us to consider this now. I think it would be tempting to wait until after the Affordability Task Force provides their decision, but we will have missed the window for them as well as for us. And I think that that whether we make this decision, that we'll be better off making this decision today than waiting until the Affordability Task Force comes with their,
I totally agree.
because the window will have been gone. So
Yeah,
it's, whatever the decision is, whether
Yeah.
it's yay or nay, we should do it today. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Councillor Ma?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a unique opportunity. I think this is a council that prides itself on bold decisions, and being nimble to take a closer look at this on the day is characteristic of us, and it's something we could try.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Graham?
I really appreciate this project coming forth and what it could do to the community. I am nervous about a run-and-gun approach to this. The Livability Task Force is in the middle of its work. We did hear that if this tax break didn't go through, that they would still go on with the project. At least that was what I heard. Right.
Do you want to deal with this today or not?
This doesn't set precedent. We can make decisions like this, but I'm concerned about people bringing last-minute things to us and saying, I need this decision now. And, you know, this project has been in the works for quite some time. It should have been brought to us in a timely manner. I'm not sure that challenge should be necessarily our challenge.
Nobody asked any questions about that, so we don't know. I know that they have been in communication with myself and administration for some time. I don't know if this timing was of their choice or otherwise. So that being the case, you get to vote yea or nay whether you want to hear it today. Anybody else wishing to speak to the motion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? So the motion passes, it carries, with Councillor Graham opposed. So now this matter is on our agenda and it's before us. I am going to move that we table it to the end of the, after the last item on the agenda. So it would be after H4, I think. All right? I'd like to call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, we'll come back to that later.
Your Worship?
Yes.
So there will be a break before that decision, correct?
Yeah. In fact, I was just taking a look when I'm going to be calling the break. I think what we're going to do is we're going to go through all of the minutes, and then we're going to take a break.
Thank you very much.
Okay? All right, so. Oh, my goodness.
Let's face it, it's the Oilers, not Canmore. There's a choker.
Yeah, very well could be. All right, so we will move to the minutes then. We have a number before us here, looking to the minutes of September 19th Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I move that we approve the minutes of September 19th, 2023 special meeting of council as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now to the minutes of October 3rd. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, oh, actually, I'll make the motion to remove the approval of the minutes of October 3rd, 2023, regular meeting of council as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now looking to the minutes of the annual organizational meeting on October 24th. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move that the minutes of October 24th, 2023 annual organizational meeting be approved as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now with regards to the October 24th special meeting of council, I do note that this is a very special meeting. It's a unique meeting. And minutes are historical. So what I would like to see added is that where it says carried unanimously with regards to all of the votes pertaining to the area structure plans, that there be a note added below it pursuant to court order. First of all, we'll take a look to the CAO. Which one is yours there? Okay. There we go.
There you go. Hey.
Yeah, and looking to the CAO, is that wording accurate, or would you suggest any other wording?
That wording is accurate. We just, council just needs to vote to,
Okay.
on the minutes to have it as you're through this process, but that wording is fine.
Okay. Now, there's two ways I can go about this. I can go our usual way and simply suggest that change, and then we vote on the minutes as amended. Or I can put forward the minutes. I can then move an amendment to add that. We can vote on the amendment, and then we can vote on the minutes. And I'm looking to, my preference is to go the former, unless anyone would like to have that separate vote. Okay, then I will ask that that be inserted, and I will move that the minutes of, or any other errors or omissions? Councillor Graham?
Just clarity on that. So under each of the carried unanimously, it's going to say carried unanimously by way of court order.
For all the ones that vote to, with respect to the ASPs, it won't be approving the agenda, it won't be the
Right.
Adjournment, it will be just the ones relating to approval of the ASPs.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so then, that being the change, I move the minutes of October 24th, 2023 special meeting of council be approved as amended. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. The minutes are carried with Councillor Faubert opposed. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't usually call the question, but given the circumstances and the special unique nature, actually, let me just back up then before I call the question, because I skipped asking if anybody would like to speak to it. Councillor Faubert, please.
I think I'd like to see our minutes remain as per how they have been traditionally done under our procedural bylaw, and the additional text to me does not add anything significant, and I recognize that the intention I'm hearing is to acknowledge the context and history of the court decision, which I think stands on its own. For that reason, I don't support a change to the minutes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry that I skipped over providing that opportunity. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Maw?
Thank you, Your Worship. I am more than happy to support the amendment. There was an exceptional situation, and the way the vote had to happen was pursuant to court order, and that's a very unique piece, and I feel it's important from a historical standpoint that that is in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Graham?
Ditto.
Okay. Okay, then I will now call the question. The motion before us is approving the minutes of October 24th, 2023 special meeting of council as amended with the addition of that pursuant to court order underneath the votes on the ASP elements. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried, geez, I'm off this morning. All those opposed? The motion is carried with Councillor Faubert opposed, and I think I need a break. So we'll all take one. And we will come back at 10:25. I need We're back. And now we're moving to item F1, Palliser Trail Area Structure Plan Bylaw 2023-22. I'm just wondering if we are going to have a presentation. Excellent. Oh, and here we are right here. Mr. Cairns, welcome to council.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, Council. I'll just share my screen for a quick. Yep.
Okay, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. So as you know, I'm Josh Cairns. I'm the Senior Policy Planner for the town of Canmore, and I'm happy to be here today to give some additional information in regards to Palliser Trail Area Structure Plan, Bylaw 2023-22, and that will help inform Council's decision on giving second and third reading to this bylaw.
Okay.
First, I'll quickly walk us through the work that has been done to date. So just a quick reminder, the updated area structure plan was the result of a 9-month expedited review that we launched at the start of 2023, just to ensure that plan would better respond to the urgency of the housing crisis, and that future development would also better align with council and community priorities. We brought draft policy options to the public for feedback in March, and that was followed by a drafting of the full area structure plan, which was introduced to council at a briefing on August 15th. Council gave first reading to the updated ASP on September 5th and referred it to a public hearing on October 3rd. And at the close of the public hearing on October 3rd, Council passed a motion to postpone second and third readings and requested administration provide information in response to some of the feedback we received from stakeholders at the meeting. And that brings us to the report before you today. The feedback we received from stakeholders, which included Bow Valley Builders and Developers Association, or BODA, as well as Canmore Community Housing, or CCH, could generally be grouped into 4 key themes. The first is plan preparation and due diligence. The second, language and requirements. The third, sustainability and environment. And finally, density and heights. I'll briefly recap some of the details of this feedback, as well as an administration's response on the following pages. But much more detailed information and administration's full response is provided in the council report. So at the public hearing, we heard questions about the viability of the plan, the anticipated operation and maintenance costs of future development, and also whether the ASP aligns with other documents for consistency and clarity. One of the first phases of work that we did in the preparation of the ASP was a thorough assessment of the original ASP from the year 2000 against the town's current policy framework. This exercise helped us identify opportunities, but more importantly, inconsistencies that could be addressed through the update. Updated policies were drafted based on the findings of this assessment, and their viability was confirmed through additional research, analysis, as well as updated studies such as transportation impact assessments, water servicing reviews, parking studies, and so on. The proposed area structure plan incorporates the results of those studies and analysis as necessary, and does offer improved consistency with the town's broader network and collection of statutory documents. It is worth noting that implementation of the plan may involve amendments to other bylaws, for example, the municipal development plan or the land use bylaw. And council may also consider amendments to the ASP in the future as new information, commitments, or standards emerge. This is really best practice, and it helps ensure there's continued alignment and that the plan implements council priorities as they do evolve over time. So this isn't going to be a fixed document that is adopted today and necessarily will stay the same forever. The second theme of feedback centered around some concerns raised by BODA about how the plan introduces some requirements along the lines of use of commanding or directive language as well. So using terms like will, shall, or must. This concern is based on the notion that this language provides a level of specificity that's probably not suitable for an ASP or could deter future development partners. The Municipal Government Act is what gives municipalities quite broad discretion over what matters are covered by ASPs. And what's particularly unique about the Palliser ASP is that it deals with lands that the town has a greater degree of control over than elsewhere. This is because most of the land is either owned by the town, Canmore Community Housing, or through a reservation agreement with the province. This means that the ASP can establish some commitments in the ASP, so long as it met some basic criteria, such as areas where we had conversations with landowners and they were in support of such a commitment, where we knew the viability of the requirement, where that requirement would align with standard practice, such as the siting of buildings for sunlight, where the ASP commitment aligns with an already approved plan or bylaw, and it's really just implementing that prior commitment, or finally, where we as a municipality are already aware and understanding that we'd be unwilling to accept a less satisfactory alternative. With that said, we did conduct a full review of the plan again, and our position is that despite some of the commitments on key items, the ASP only introduces commitments in very certain instances where they're truly appropriate, and that the plan does allow for considerable flexibility, whether it is the estimated unit counts or allowing the developer, such as the town or CCH, the ability to even target different income levels on the housing or income spectrum. And that really reflects the reality that we know there are uncertainties when it comes to developing such a large, undeveloped area. Third, we heard from some stakeholders that the ASP should incentivize or encourage sustainability or environmental goals rather than actually mandate and require them. It's important to clarify that this ASP is not introducing excessive new requirements. Rather, its focus is just on implementing existing commitments that the town has already made in the past. One of the notable environmental and sustainability policies is the requirement that new development would achieve near net zero emissions or a similar high green building standard. While we acknowledge this is something the industry might not be super familiar with yet, this policy implements a commitment that was made years ago in the town's climate action plan. And it's one that we know offers significant benefits to residents. It has an established track record as a very achievable standard, and it's one that will continue to remain relevant over time, as the federal government is planning for this to become the nationwide standard by the early 2030s. The appropriateness of this policy was reassessed after the public hearing, including some follow-up conversation with CCH, but administration's position is that this requirement remains appropriate for the ASP, as it does implement existing policy direction and is, at a very minimum, a standard that we have to implement if we want to try to achieve our prior greenhouse gas emission targets. Other environmental policies that are in the ASP simply align with best practices or look to provide additional clarity around what guidelines will apply in this area or what recommendations stand. One example would be the BC Ag guidelines for wildlife corridor setback. So it's articulating how those relate to the ASP and what applies and is given precedence. Finally, the final theme we heard was focused on the question about, do we need firm height or density limits in the plan, particularly since the town and CCH are the landowners and have the ability to provide needed housing units in the area? That's a great question, but one of the primary purposes of ASPs is to actually answer some of those questions, provide that future vision for an undeveloped area of land, and provide certainty for industry, the town, and for residents about how that area will evolve over time. The heights and some of the anticipated unit ranges that we put in the plan will support transparency with the public. It'll help us ensure that infrastructure is efficiently provided. And finally, it will support development that's also consistent with town bylaws and priorities. Having led this planning process as the actual project proponent, we also had the opportunity to consider what heights would be appropriate in this area. And the limits in the ASP balance community and stakeholder feedback. They align with our established housing targets. They respond to the unique context of the Palliser Trail area. And finally, they'll deliver on the urban design objectives, as we do want to ensure this area becomes a highly attractive, livable, and inclusive community, not just an area where we put our affordable housing. With all that said, it's important to acknowledge that the ASP does allow flexibility where necessary, as I've mentioned. For example, the unit counts are only estimated projections, and that's because there's several variables that can only be defined at a future planning stage that would impact that unit total. That includes questions around what a development is targeting for average unit sizes. How many studios, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom units? What's the overall massing of the building? Are there any land dedications on that site? What about the establishment of street right-of-ways and how large are they? What's the overall street network looking like when we get down to the nitty-gritty details? And even the provision of parking, open spaces on site, those will all drastically impact unit counts. So while we do provide a range that is meant to anchor future development, administration does have some discretion and flexibility to accommodate small changes. In closing, and to wrap this up, we do want to take a moment, of course, to thank everyone for taking the time to participate in the project, whether that was through the earlier engagement activities or those that spoke or submitted comments at the public hearing. This feedback from a diverse audience obviously helps us make sure the plan is much more inclusive, beneficial, and also attainable. These are all things that we hope any plan would achieve, and the Palliser Trail ASP is no exception. Having gone through the process and fully considered the feedback, at this time, we do not feel any new information that was shared that would warrant an amendment to the plan. And some of our rationales summarized here, but explained more fully in the report. A lot of what we did here at the public hearing are common points of discussion that are considered along the way in drafting this plan. There are questions around scope, specificity, and policy direction. These were already considered during the planning process, and we did do due diligence and reconsider them again in response to the feedback we heard at the public hearing. At this point in time, administration's recommendations from the public hearing remain unchanged, which is to give second and third readings to the Palliser Trail Area Structure Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cairns. Looking to council to see if there are any questions. And I see none. It looks like your presentation was complete and completely understandable. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you for all your work on this, and I really do appreciate the analysis of the feedback that was received during the public hearing. I think I speak for council when I say it was very helpful, and your level of detail was very much appreciated. I will now move the council gives second reading to Palliser Trail Area Structure Plan Bylaw 2023-22. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councillor Faubert.
I've been waiting for this moment because I believe this is the right time to be fully in support of the Palliser Area Structure Plan as presented. And for me, it's a decision that is really personal and professional. I don't just sit on council as a decision maker for the community. I also live in the Palliser area. And for my entire life living here in Canmore, like most of us, I have had different types of housing available to me. I've seen the housing market and the housing situation change over time. And at this juncture, the best hand we have as a council to play to help our community is to leverage these public lands to support the residents, workers, businesses, and economy of the town of Canmore. When I think back to the council priorities that we set after we were first elected of livability, relationships, and environment, I truly see all these things reflected in the plan and the policies in the plan. I ride my bike a lot in the Palliser area, and the other day I was coming down the hill and I could see in my mind's eye a vision of the future that this plan lays out with transit, pathways, a dog park, families living and knowing that they have secure housing into the future in this community, a pedestrian overpass so people don't run across the highway anymore. All of these things are really exciting for me, and with that, I'm very, very, very much in support and excited to vote in favor of this. And I'm really grateful that Mr. Cairns came back today with some additional information on some of the areas that were brought up during the public hearing, because I think that that just lends additional support for council's approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Planning Department, Ms. Miller, Mr. Cairns, for your great work with this ASP. This is a flagship opportunity for Canmore because we own these lands or have a great degree of control over it. And so I think it's really important that we shoot high and not water down our vision. So thank you. I shall happily vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. These lands were slated for development if we had received the Olympic bid. Can you imagine what it would have been like trying to fulfill that promise? And the housing that would have been planned over there really does not encapsulate the vision that we see in this document today. I have been pushing since 2018 for council to see the opportunity, previous and current, that's on those lands, and I'm really happy that and honored that council saw that vision, picked up the ball, and has run with it for the last 2 years. Because I really think that this is our last opportunity to really house the backbone of our community. We also have this amazing opportunity to lead, which you can see in the document itself. And I agree with you, I wouldn't want to water down one word of it. We have the opportunity to show our residents and other communities how much we care about not just affordability to get in, but affordability over time, and how that can be delivered through climate change adaptation and green energy. And I also think we have this great opportunity to embrace a more progressive way of living within this land, and a beautiful fire hall to punctuate the entrance of the whole place. So I'll be happy to support this. And I'm glad that we were able to bring it back to address some of the concerns from the development community. But I think what was missed is that this isn't a private project. This is a public project. It's meant to benefit all of Canmore, and I look forward to seeing how it slowly fulfills itself over time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to start by thanking this council for being bold. Councillor McCallum in particular for bringing this forward a couple of years ago. I think this is one of the first motions we dealt with at Finance Committee. And to see that come to light is exciting. Administration for seeing that vision and bringing a project for us that addressed all of the issues that we're looking to deal with today. To the public for bringing all your feedback and pushing us to do as best as we could with this project. I was at the Building Sustainability Conference the last couple of days, and one of the key points that I picked up on was total cost of ownership and how environmental sustainability is a long-term investment to affordability. And this project really looks to do that. I'm excited about those ideas. I'm excited about the future of this town, and I'm excited that we're moving this forward. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hillside?
I concur. You stole my ditto earlier, so I had to change it up. No, this is going to be a great project. Again, thanks to council and admin for really pushing this through and just coming back with a great ASP. A lot of work went into it. You can see that admin listened to our residents. They took those concerns into account, and they made changes from the outset to really try to allay some of those concerns. Again, we have limited land, so we kind of have to build up to get the numbers of residents we want to get in there. So it's going to be a change, and with any change, there's going to be some bumps in the road ahead, but hopefully people can get behind this, and yeah, I'm just excited that we got to this point today. So.
Thank you. Councillor Mara.
Thank you. I won't use the word ditto, but, but I do echo what Councillor Hilsa has just said. And again, and I'd like to also recognize Councillor McCallum I've been working with Councillor McCallum for 6 years now, and I appreciate, she's always had this vision. She's always had this vision, and I've been on board, as she knows, supporting her behind that, and it's nice to see that it's starting to come to fruition. And I'd like to thank admin for moving this forward as quickly as they have, so thank you.
Thank you. You know, I would like to say that really there's no other description of this other than this is a game changer. Right from the start, moving forward with this ASP, it became a priority of this council. This council decided that we were going to take bold initiatives to address housing. So we need to celebrate this for a second, and then we need to look forward to the next tasks, which are, you know, obviously updating the land use bylaw and ultimately getting concurrent projects going in the coming years, initiated by Canmore Community Housing and the town of Canmore. And of course, while this is a game changer and it's a big piece of the puzzle, it's not the only piece of the puzzle. So we look forward to also hearing back from the Livability Task Force on their recommendations around tourist homes, encouraging permanent residency, as well as incentivizing and encouraging purpose-built rentals, along with other steps that we will take along the way as well. Sometimes people talk in terms of legacy. I don't think that there's really a strong legacy desire amongst this council other than making a huge positive change for our community. And the biggest thing that we can do is address housing, which addresses affordability, and which addresses our ability to maintain our community character rather than being hollowed out by natural economic forces if left unabated. So I think that this is a monumental moment in the history of this town, certainly for this council, and one that I support wholeheartedly. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now I'll move that council give third reading to Palliser Trail Area Structure Plan Bylaw 2023-22. Anybody want to add anything? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.
Now the real work begins.
That's right. We'll now move to item G1. By the way, that applause was our moment of celebration. Now we move on. G1, Property Tax Rate Bylaw Amendment 2023-30. Ms. Rogers, we have a little correction to make.
Correct. This is a clerical correction that we're asking council to approve. We had a number transposition in the property tax bylaw last year. It was brought to our attention by someone at the province. The taxes collected were correct. It was just the bylaw that was incorrect. And since the property tax bylaw forms part of our records, we wanted to make sure that the record reflected the correct number.
Great.
That's the end of my presentation.
So really, no harm done, but we need
Correct.
to make sure the number's correct.
Correct.
Okay, any questions from council on that? Seeing none.
Thanks.
I'll move, thank you, Ms. Rogers. I'll move the council give first reading to Property Tax Rate Bylaw Amendment 2023-30. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Graham?
Just clear, this doesn't need to have public input at all, correct? Okay,
No.
thank you.
Anything else? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll move the council give second reading to Property Tax Rate Bylaw Amendment 2023-30. Anyone wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll move the council give leave to go to third reading of Property Tax Rate Bylaw Amendment 2023-30. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now I'll move that council give third reading to Property Tax Rate Bylaw Amendment 2023-30. Anyone wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving on to new business, H1, 2024 capital project, wastewater treatment plant, odor control construction, 7370 scope approval. Mr. Como, welcome to council.
Thank you. Actually, it's nice to be here. We have some good news for Mayor and Council as well. So just as a reminder, this is a project that was approved back in 2023 or I guess December 2022 as a 2024 project that had determined what the capital costs were, but we didn't have the scope, and which was also a project that was moved up because we were experiencing a growing number of odor concerns in the community around the wastewater treatment plant. So we'd moved the project up, but we needed to understand what we actually needed to do. So tonight, or this afternoon, or this morning,
There's a lot of that going around.
Yeah. Today we have those details. We can firm up the scope and move forward with this project to the betterment of the community that lives in and around the wastewater treatment plant. So that the recommendation is the council approve the revised scope for 2024 capital project wastewater treatment plant odor control construction project number 7370. So just as a reminder, or maybe as I mentioned, we did have odor concerns, and what this map shows is where we have received actual complaints from the community. And you can see there's quite a bit down in South Canmore, and even on the other side of the Bow River, near Prospect area, Van Horn, and then of course the Avens area. So quite a concern, and the numbers were growing, and so we needed to move ahead. And I would say that the plant still has the capacity. We believe that some of the concerns, why we've had more, is the winds have changed a lot. We've had warmer weathers, and the winds, which would normally go from this view, from top down and disperse out of the valley, are starting to, at times, push the winds back up in towards our developed areas. So we had hired a consultant. They were to monitor, determine where the sources are, and then evaluate various technologies and share with us what they felt were the key recommendations in moving forward. Their expertise told us that there was really two types of smells that they were looking for. One was just general wastewater treatment plant odors, and the other is hydrogen sulfide. They did that in the summer of 2023. They also utilized some air dispersion modeling as well to determine where the impact is and what it was actually doing to the community, which I'll share with council as well. So around odor limits, the province doesn't have any limits for us, but the City of Calgary actually does. So they use the City of Calgary limits, which are odor units, which is what the OU are per cubic meter. Don't really know what that is, but it can be quantified, and they did. They'd put monitoring systems throughout the wastewater treatment plant along the fence line, and used the limit of 7 odor units per cubic meter. And what they noticed is that the majority of the odors are coming from the dewatering building, which I'll share with you shortly where that is, but essentially that's the end of the wastewater treatment plant process. And that there's a lot of it not only in the dewatering building, but also in the headworks, which ironically is the front of the wastewater treatment plant. So the front and the back is where we were having our biggest concerns. Similarly, they were on the hydrogen sulfide. The province has limits. There's an Alberta ambient air quality objective, and the limit is within an hour that it not exceed 14 parts per billion, and within 24 hours, 4 parts per billion. And the primary source, again, is at the headworks at the front of the plant, the inlet wells where all the pipes bring in the wastewater from the different lift stations. And what we did notice is that we are exceeding the limits at the wastewater treatment plant. So this is where one of the bigger priorities is to deal with the hydrogen sulfide. And the consultant says if we deal with that, it will deal with it throughout the entire plant by removing sulfur. So here is part of their dispersion models overlaid with where the key complaints were. The blue dot in the middle is the wastewater treatment plant. And on the right-hand side, you can see the key as far as what the hydrogen sulfide levels are. So the orange, you can see we are over at 100 parts per billion around the plant. So very much exceeding, and obviously a priority for us, especially for the operators that are working there, is that we combat that immediately. Of course, there's benefit combating odors, both on hydrogen sulfide side as well as the general odors. And then you can see that, I guess it is hard to see where the blue is, but basically it's bad. And it's not a surprise to see where the odors or complaints are coming from. The air dispersion models you can see despite some of the assumptions they were making, are fairly accurate in terms of the overlay. So with that, the recommendations are to consider putting processes in place in a phased approach. So the first one is to add an iron salt dosing system at the headworks. So as the plant, the inlets bring in the wastewater, that we add ferric chloride at the plant. What that does is it helps precipitate the solids, the sulfur out that's collected through other processes through the rest of the plant, like for the clarifiers, for example. We are actually possibly in a fortunate position. There was a pre-existing dosing system within the front of the plant that once we get the go-ahead with this, is we're going to confirm if that system is still operable and that we can utilize it for this. If not, we'll have to put a separate dosing system in. That's why you see a range, a budget from $810 to $1.8 million. And again, that is within the $2 million approved budget. The second phase, which the consultant is recommending to do after phase one and continuous monitoring, is to look at a carbon filter at the dewatering. So if it's not meeting the needs, we're still getting odor complaints, there is that ability to do it. But at this point, it's felt that it's not necessary to do until we've put in first phase one and done some monitoring. And it's expensive. It's probably going to be $1.6 to $2 million to actually do it, and it may not be necessary. So here, this is the wastewater treatment plant aerial view, and you can see the dewatering, or the headworks building down at the bottom. So the idea would be the iron salting dosing would occur there at the inlet wells, which are located just outside the headworks building. And we have two boxes there because depending on how we go forward, our ability to get the product we need and how comprehensive the design is, we may be looking at a temporary dosing system, which is the smaller box that we have there. And the reason for that is we understand that there is a real drive to resolve this issue by spring of 2024. So some of this, exactly what will happen, will depend on availability of equipment and so on. That said, the second box, the larger one that you see there under the iron salt dosing arrow, would be the more permanent facility that we would attach to the headworks. And then you can see the faint arrow that it goes to the right and then up. That's kind of the way the product moves through the plant to the north to the dewatering. And if necessary, through monitoring where it's deemed that we have to move with phase two, that's where that upgrade would occur, and a carbon filter would be located where you can see there in that dark orange box. But that's not being recommended at this time. Alternatives, phase two, again, it may not be necessary, and it's a lot of money. So at this point, we're going to take the consultant's advice and delay that work. On the financial side, by putting in ferric chloride dosing, we have to pay for the ferric chloride. So the costs, operating costs, is estimated to be $250,000 a year. The current project is approved at $2 million. You saw the range and what the upgrades can be depending on what's there. So the intent is to go forward, fund the upgrade for the iron salt dosing and cover the 2024 costs within the capital plan. Because we really don't know what those are until we have it operating. And then we take those real cost numbers and we would incorporate those into the upcoming 2025 and plus budget. That's the end of my presentation. There's the recommendation. I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Como. Thank you for bringing this summary of the work that's been done to us with the recommendations. A couple of questions. How soon will we know if the iron salt application is having a positive impact on odors?
That's a great question. I think it's a wait and see, to be honest. I have a lot of trust in the consultant who has done similar work across the country. They have found that this works. What's key is the primary source of the odors is the hydrogen sulfide. Yeah. And by removing the sulfur through the ferrochloride dosing, we can make a significant improvement. To what degree? Unfortunately, we have to do a wait and see.
So the thought is that the addressing the H2S at the front end will have a positive impact, hopefully, when it gets to the other end where most of the orders have been emanating from.
Exactly. That's the intent.
We'd
see benefits, actually, sorry, Mayor Councilor, through the entire plan. So even standing by the clarifiers, we should see the levels of odors go down.
So let me ask from a different point of view then, because I think that the odors got to a point where residents, visitors, businesses, all were at, wow, we can't deal with this any longer. They've been extremely patient this summer. And you know what, we're willing to wait knowing that a study was being done. But, you know, it really, we just can't have another summer like this if at all possible. So if the odors do persist, how quick would it be to implement the second phase if it came to council for approval? Was that something that could be a quick fix if the odors are still there? We need to add this carbon system. Come to council, ask for the mid-term request. We got to go with this because it's not working. Will that have be able to be implemented sooner? Or is that a big, long project to implement?
Carbon filters are fairly commonplace. The real work is an evaluation of the building in more detail to know how they can funnel all of the air in that building through this carbon filter. So all to say that it would not be a super quick fix. There would have to be some analysis on air handling, a detailed design on the project so we can put it out to tender. So I would say if we were unsuccessful in mitigating the orders through the summer of 2024, we could have it in place for summer of 2025, I think would be the earliest. That said, the conversations with the consultant is, if we can address sulfur, we can address the majority of issues. Is it going to be enough for everybody or every circumstances? Again, that's going to be a wait and see. But it would not be able to be something I don't believe that we can do in 2024.
Okay, and according to the consultants, it may be something we may not have to do at all.
Correct.
Okay, great. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Couser. Thank you, Mr. Como. In the map that you had, that had all you had said that the orange was around 100 parts.
Yeah, you can see the scale on the right-hand side.
Oh, now I see the scale. Okay, so then the blue, okay, that
is the residential area, and you can see that was bumping up against the 7 parts per million, and so within a 24-hour period, that should be less than 4.
Yeah, okay. And then just kind of a follow-up to one of the mayor's questions around how will we know if this works? Would it be possible to include monitoring of the hydrogen sulfur? Which one is it?
Hydrogen sulfide.
Hydrogen sulfide levels post implementation of this project is that something we could do to kind of measure the effect?
Oh, for sure. That's part of the project, is that we would have hydrogen sulfide monitoring systems, because we want to actually understand. We don't want to just carte blanche, just keep significant dosing, right? It's expensive, and largely can be unnecessary. So they'll need to be monitoring through, and then fed into our SCADA system that understands what our dosing limits are, so that we can balance, so that we're doing the appropriate dosing to match the level of hydrogen sulfide that's being detected.
Awesome. So if I understand you right, by the implementation of this project, there will be like new monitoring of our hydrogen sulfide levels in order to gauge how much of this we put into the process. That's
For sure, and probably, even though I really feel for the people who had experienced this summer, we owe it to the staff who work in that proximity to ensure that the hydrogen sulfide levels are not exceeding what's permitted under the provincial guidelines.
100%, yeah. I do have more questions, but I'm going to...
Keep going.
Okay. You'd mentioned that there was a iron salt dosing system in the, that's...
No, a dosing system.
So it's a dosing system, not an iron salt dosing system?
Yeah, so it's just a general dosing system. It would have likely been used for alum, which is a coagulant we use at the front of the plant. So it's really, is it still operable, and can it be repurposed, is the next investigation.
Oh, awesome. So structurally it could assist. I just thought, in my mind, I was like, oh, we used to do this? No, we didn't used to do this. The carbon solution, at the tail end of the process, what would be the long-term carbon filter system? What would be the long-term operating costs of that?
What I know about carbon filters is they're actually not that expensive. The medium doesn't need to be replaced that often, and that's all you're really doing is simply that. Of course, then there's the whatever air handling work that needs to be done to ensure that all the air is moving through that space.
Okay. So if in the future it was a combination of these two technologies that we needed in place, really the operational costs come down to the iron salt amounts?
Yes.
Amazing. Those are all my questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Ma?
Thank you, Mr. Como. So we got two smells we're dealing with. We got H2S, which is also a hazardous thing for the operators in the facility. Then we just have like a general smell of Odour wastewater. But by taking care of the H2S, that will also take care of the secondary smell as well.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
At least that's the plan. Any other questions? I guess I just have a question, is if you could now take this analysis on the road to our Alberta hockey teams, because there's something pretty stinky going on there. Sorry, I'm still suffering from the Oilers loss last night, again.
I empathize.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Como. We appreciate this work and your presentation. So I will move that Council approve the revised scope for 2024 capital project wastewater treatment plant odor control construction number 7370. Anybody like to speak to this motion? I'll definitely be supporting this. I am really hoping that this makes a big difference in the quality of air for those surrounding areas. My home is definitely in those areas, and I've definitely smelled it this past summer way more than ever before. And if it can if this can make that improvement, so many people, both residents and visitors, will have much more enjoyable access to the outdoors. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be speaking in favor of this motion. Part of me had considered, like, why don't we just do both things now, just in case, but the presentation really helped me support moving forward with this technology in particular to address this issue first. And I think that the situation really kind of speaks to sort of the patience we need as residents of our community when it comes to some of the solutions to some of our problems, because we had to take the time to understand the problem and where it's coming from in order to come up with the solution. So I'm glad that we are at solution stage, and I believe that next summer will be better, and I'm already grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I was actually also considering whether we should do both together, but given the consultant's advice, it is more prudent to do one before the other and hopefully not have to do the second. So thank you for that. Councillor Merritt.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this forward. I too appreciate, and will respect the recommendation from our consultants. After living in the 70s down by where the sewage plant was, I can appreciate, and I would like to say thank you to the residents who waited out for our process to move forward. And this is the first time I smelt it up in Cougar Creek this summer, so it definitely needed to be done. So I would in full support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Mr. Como noted in his presentation, this last summer is interesting because the wind was often blowing in the opposite direction than typical. But having said that, as we go through a world of climate change and understand those effects, that could be potentially something that happens more and more. And we could be trending to a situation where last year's summer could possibly become a new normal. So taking care of these steps here, fingers crossed we don't need to go to the carbon filter right away, and let's get those odor units down.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too want to thank administration for moving this one relatively quickly. I get to sample that air about 6 times a day as I float down that river, and some days it is unbelievable. So I'll have my own sampling data for the summer. I too want to thank the residents for their patience in this one, and hope, I was really happy to hear that it wasn't a capacity issue, and that was something that has come up a lot. Is it long weekends with lots of visitors here? No, it's probably more wind-based and system-based, so really happy to hear that one as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you. I'll be happy to support this. I guess I could say ditto again because everyone's already said it. So, but again, I think as Mr. Como pointed out, again, the staff at the wastewater treatment plant are the ones that are really going to benefit from this because they're in it. So hopefully it'll pass the smell test. I was expecting Mayor Kressler to throw that one out there, but he missed his chance.
Well, no, I was actually surprised we didn't get more complaints from the workers themselves, but perhaps they've gone nose blind to it. Yeah. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to item H2, 2023 Capital Budget Amendment, FireSmart 2023 Capital Project. Chief Bushy, welcome to Council.
Mayor, Council, thank you for hearing me out this morning. So on the heels of a free application that you all approved earlier in the year, we've been awarded $200,000 towards some vegetation management in the Larch area. So this basically bringing this forward, showing you the plan as for the mapping there in descending order through the A's and through the B's to expend as much or all of the $200,000 towards this project. Yeah, we've got the $200,000, no impacts to the current budgets. It's just to open it up in the budgets to expend it. We'd have the work started as soon as possible and wrap up basically sometime in March.
Great. Thank you very much.
So the recommendation is that council approve the new 2023 capital project for vegetation management funded by FRIA in the grant amount of $200,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Looking to see if there's any questions from council. Seeing none? Appreciate you being here today. I'll therefore move that council approve a new 2023 capital project for vegetation management funded in full by the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta grant in the amount of $200,000. Just speaking to the motion, I'm very happy that we continue to do this work. This is essential potential emergency crisis management work that will protect lives and property if ever put to the test. It will certainly slow things down should something happen. So I support this type of work continuing wholeheartedly. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. I walked through that area back in the IRC days with Caitlin Van Gaal, and it was interesting to see. It's like sections A1 here, how they have been thinned prior, but it doesn't take long to have to get back in there and clean it up once more. And I also wanted to say thank you so much for Chief Bushy for being so diligent getting these grants so we can continue doing this work. So thank you for that lift.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to item H3, 14-month term permit clerk position request. Ms. Smithers, the microphone is all yours.
Hello. Yes, verbal. Hopefully not too verbal. And I'll try to do this without dumping my laptop over the edge. So I am here today with a request for a term position for a permit clerk in the Planning and Development Department, and it is related to the launch of CityView Online. So as you've heard, it's come up in different discussions before. The town is continuing to move towards an online portal for applicants submitting development applications to the Planning and Development Department. Currently, the system is that applicants submit PDFs to an email address, then staff on the other end manually transfer those PDFs into CityView because it's kind of the back of house software that we already use. And then there's an ongoing interface between CityView and just email between the permit clerk and the file manager and the applicant. So in cleaning that up, we want to move to fully embracing the functionality of CityView, and that includes the creation of an online portal where applicants will submit their entire application through that portal, so there's an efficiency there, and then they can actually even apply for or pay for their permits online. So currently they either need to phone the permit clerk and arrange for payment or submit a check to the town. So to do so, applicants will need to create an account online, and then once they have that account, the portal just walks them kind of page by page through their submission requirements. So in leading up to the launch of CityView, the CityView portal, we've run about 136 test cases. I won't say that there won't be any glitches in the system, but we've done a lot of testing to do our best to ensure that it will work smoothly for everyone. We have been, and right up until today, we're currently training staff on how to use the portal. And then we also had a public launch that started on October 25th. So between our website, online newsletters, e-news, social media, Rocky Mountain Outlook ads, and then also working with BODA to share information to their members, we've put a lot of information out there on the anticipated launch of the new system, how it's going to work, and sharing information for applicants on how to use it. So the go live date is scheduled for tomorrow, and staff will be on standby to support applicants as needed, although we do anticipate, as I've mentioned, a lot of efficiency to be found in the portal because it gets rid of that manual transfer between email and the kind of back-end CityView. Initially, we expect that there will be a need to support applicants in setting up their accounts, getting comfortable with the system, and just being available in real time to support applicants with questions as they navigate the system. So we are requesting a term position for a permit clerk to support that kind of help desk resource function for applicants. The CityView portal is a key step of business transformation for the application submission piece. And we do expect that there are going to be some applicants who may need some support working with the system. These could either be regular applicants who are just going to be experiencing a change in how they submit applications and interact with the town throughout the course of their application. And it would also be first-time users who might only use the system once in their lifetime because it's a home renovation or something like that. We expect that when applicants are needing some support, that those requests will come in via phone or email, and we do really need to be able to support, address those requests or issues as soon as possible, so that people can continue with getting their applications submitted and processed. And we do anticipate as well the customer support need will be ongoing, given that we're phasing the transition of application types, and also applications don't come in like 100 at a time and then nothing, right? They're going to come in over time, so it could be 3 months from now somebody's interacting with the system for the first time, or 4 months from now, or 5 months from now. So we want to make sure that we've got that support available for applicants as it is needed. This will also help us provide timely customer support in transitioning to the new system and introducing new phases of the portal, because we'll have 2 permit clerks instead of now just 1. So if we have a permit clerk who can kind of function as a help desk, then we are also freeing up capacity to do some of the testing for the subsequent phases of applications that we're going to be transitioning to the portal. So there was a recommendation in your council agenda. I've put a slight modification to it because council doesn't approve positions, but it approves the funding. So what we're asking is that council approve the allocation of up to $78,000 for a 14-month term position for our permit clerk to support the implementation of CityView Online Portal in the Planning Department, and that would be funded from the Development Application Reserve.
Great.
And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Looking to see if there are any questions. Seeing none, and I would just ask if that could stay up there so we have the...
Yes, I'm just going to turn my computer so it doesn't fall off when I let go of it.
Sure.
There you go.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, then I will move that council approve the allocation of up to $78,000 for a 14-month term position for a permit clerk to support the implementation of CityView Online Portal in the Planning Department from the Development Application Reserve. Speaking to the motion, we really need to give CityView every opportunity to work and work well. I think it's essential that our development and building permit timelines become as efficient as possible, and my understanding is that CityView will help that to happen. And so in order to give this process every chance of success, I will definitely be supporting this motion. Looking to see if anyone else would like to speak to the motion. Seeing none, oh, Councillor McCallum, go ahead.
I was just going to say that this change is something that the planning department has been working really hard on, and it is something that the development community has been looking forward to in terms of streamlining our processes. And I agree with you, Your Worship, that giving this program every opportunity to be successful is incumbent upon us on making sure it's properly resourced. So I appreciate administration bringing this term position forward for us to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. This brings us to Thank you, Ms. Smithers. This brings us to H4. I have provided a motion to the clerk's office that I would ask to be put up on the screen, but I'll start to speak to the issue. We are looking as a council to take bold initiatives. Within that, we have just approved the Palliser ASP today. Consequently, once we have the bylaws updated, there will be able to be projects moving forward from CCH, from the town of Canmore, in order to address our housing crisis, and in this area in particular, where at least 75% of the units will be non-market. This is work that I look forward to getting done. However, a reality of the municipal life is that we quite rightly are limited within having a debt limit for the municipality, and we have internally restricted that to 75% of our actual limit, which I believe is prudent. Now, debt limits are typically encroached upon for municipal projects that qualify for them, and therefore we only have a certain number that we can have going at any particular time. While we do have housing taking up some of our debt limit space because CCH's projects are counted under our debt limit, the debt limit was actually never originally forecast for that. It's for other types of municipal projects, and they have a certain life, and you know what, they don't really have a market value. You know, it's tough to sell somebody your wastewater treatment plant or something of that nature. Whereas housing, real estate, is a different animal. It actually does have a market value. It actually can be perfectly secured in its loans, so that those types of debt financing doesn't need the same sort of statutory protection as is available in the market itself, given that the financial institutions providing the borrowing can take full security of the asset. As such, and in order to have concurrent housing projects go, which could not happen if we are having to keep hitting the debt limit roof that we have, I'm proposing that we advocate to the provincial government to not include debt taken by the municipality or a municipally wholly owned subsidiary for the purposes of financing non-market or affordable housing development. Now, I have floated this idea with some members of the provincial government, and they actually thought it was a pretty good idea. So I would like to formally do that, but before doing so, have the endorsement and encouragement of the council. So you'll see that the motion that I would like to put on the table, and I will do so momentarily, is up on the screen, and it basically goes to what I suggested. So first of all, I'll open it up to if there's any questions as opposed to speaking to the motion, and then I'll put the motion on the table and we can speak to it then. Councillor Verberg, did you have a question or did you wish to speak to the motion? Okay, perfect. Okay, any questions then? Okay, so I will then move that Council direct Mayor Krauser to advocate to the government of the province of Alberta to not include debt taken by a municipality or a municipally municipal wholly owned subsidiary for the purposes of financing non-market or affordable housing development, whether for resident ownership or rental, in the calculation of debt that is subject to the municipal debt limit. I guess the only thing I would add to what I have already said in speaking to the motion is that I believe that this also could be beneficial to any municipality in Alberta. I believe that, as we've shown when we've done an assessment of which community puts the most monetary support towards housing, Canmore is number one. So I think we're at the front end, but that doesn't mean that others won't find themselves in the same situation, or with this, be provided with some opportunities as well. So beyond our own community, I believe that this could have a far-reaching positive impact as well. So Councillor Faubert, you'd like to speak to the motion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Krauser, for bringing forward this motion and seeking council ratification of this direction and this advocacy to the province of Alberta. I believe that this idea's time has finally come. This is not a new policy idea in any way, shape, or form, but it is one that today I think we can change some minds on, because we're not the only municipality or municipal government working on housing. And I think there was a while where we were. It wasn't really within the scope or the awareness of other municipalities that they might have a role to play in providing housing for their workforces, and in terms of the context of affordability. But affordability is now affecting everyone across Canada and not just our community. So I'm very much in favor of this, and it will help all communities in Alberta if we are able to kind of flip the switch on this one and get in the ears of the people who have the ability to make this change. And this is just a policy change. It requires no money from the province. Right? Like, it really, really empowers us and enables us as municipalities to do this well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would agree that this is something that has been coming for a long time. I know that this has been advocated for at Alberta municipalities over the years, and if you recollect, in 2018, when we were considering the Olympic bid, we were asking for an extension to our debt limits, in addition to, I believe, it was sort of a short-term rotating line of credit to manage the expenses that we were going to have to take on that would eventually flow through. So I think that if you wanted to even consider doing some advocacy on that, Your Worship, you would be welcome to, because I think the two are hand in hand. That being said, you can't flog sewer pipes at the market, nor can you flog light posts, but you certainly could do so with housing. And so there's definitely a commodification piece, which we're seeing how it's playing out in the market now, that is really biting people and is key to us being successful on this project in Palliser and any other housing projects that we take on. So I'd be happy to support this, in addition to just the housing piece itself. If the provincial government, who, housing is their responsibility, wants to see the tourism dollars flow out of their tourism communities, they're going to have to start making changes to invest in those communities. And this is a big, big piece of that investment. So I thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? I appreciate both those comments, and I just want to underline what Councillor Faubert raised as well, that this will not cost the province anything. This is a statutory amendment. The Premier had a couple of times, when here speaking with Boda and also when speaking with mid-sized cities, has put out the challenge that let her government know what barriers there are to bringing housing into our communities and addressing the housing crisis. And I think that this is full on point to that challenge, and one that I hope will be easy to accept by the provincial government, because I think that this would have us all rowing in the same direction. So thank you for that. The motion is on the table. I will now call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so now we come to the item that was tabled. I'm just going to call a 3-minute break as I get this to Ms. Hyde to be able to put up on the screen. It may take a longer break if I need to decipher my writing too. So we'll take a few minute breaks. We'll be back as soon as the motion's ready. Okay. I am so sorry. Okay. I'm going to give the Coles Note version then of what I just said. Thank you, Ms. Hyde, for catching that. So a motion is on the table, that I've been put forth regarding the request of the delegation to receive a property tax exemption for a rental project that they are creating at 900 Railway Avenue. It's on the screen, and I won't read it again, but in speaking to it, rather than having an undefined term as Ms. Rogers, did you have a...
I did, sorry. I just got some late-breaking information from our Livability Task Force consultant. We've been trying to figure out kind of the mechanics. There was a question earlier on how we would actually do this, and I just wanted to make sure council was in the loop. We are able to establish a subclass and can determine a different tax rate for purpose-built rental or for this particular property, but it can't be zero. So I don't know if we want to change the word from exempt to a rebate or a reduction or something like that.
Well, I think for the purposes here, the tool we have available under the MGA is to exempt taxes. And until we've actually created a subclass, I would hesitate to say that we are creating a subclass. And I think it could be, if that's the way we went in the future, it could either be converted with no practical change, or it could be just retained as this one being a one-off, and everything else would be subject to a subclass. So I think that would be the way we'd have to proceed here, because I wouldn't want to create a subclass right now. So thank you for that information. Councillor Mara, you had a question?
I just have a comment. Mike, thank you. This is for the rental property. There's also a commercial component, and is that also being asked to be excused from taxes?
That wouldn't be my recommendation. The direction I think that we're hearing from council is about the purpose-built rental piece, not any commercial or...
Right. So there would be some tax from the commercial spot.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I will do is I would ask Ms. Hyde to put in from the municipal portion of residential property taxes. Okay. So it's speaking to it, I'm actually just going to continue to speak to it before I deal with any further questions. So that's why I put in the 10 years as opposed to unlimited. I put in at least 95% because my understanding is that's what they're aiming for 100, but there's always potential that something changes and there's at any given time one unit could be out of line or something like that. I do think that it's important that we have an understanding that we want to be reported back on about this so that we know that the terms are being met and that there is a consequence if this was ever to not become rental or purpose-built rental and convert to a condominium design. Even if those owners were full-time residents, it's not helping us with our rental, which this is designed to do. So that's the motion that I'm putting forward for consideration. And I would love to hear people's comments and if there's any suggested changes or whatnot. And Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. I know that we're being asked to make a significant decision on the same day that that idea has been put in front of us. And I am prepared to move forward and support a tax exemption. I feel like that with time and the Livability Task Force, the idea of what an appropriate tax exemption should be would come out in that process. And I support that, but I also I want to make sure that we're leveraging every single dollar available to us as a community to provide housing. And while this is a private sector project, there is CMHC funding available to be accessed. And so I'm comfortable with this right now. The one area where I had imagined there being a bit of a difference was in sort of that, whether it was a full tax exemption. And one of the reasons why I'm more in favor of a partial tax exemption is because it's not just that this property owner doesn't pay that amount. It's that the rest of our community now has to pay that amount, because those taxes still need to be collected to pay for our municipal services. So, right? So I feel that a reduced amount for those services that the residents of that building gets is better, especially if that also paves the way forward for the accessing of these CMHC dollars. But in a conversation during the break, it may be that if we reduce the exemption, it reduces how much money they can access. And so without doing that other work yet, I think I'm at this, and not having heard from my fellow councillors about sort of that area of debate. I'm prepared to move forward, but I was considering an amendment.
And what percentage would you have, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm certainly open to that, and I wanted to hear what council was thinking. I know it's kind of like just,
Well,
is 50% or 75%, something like that?
There were three things I thought of. One, 50%, right? Half off. Who doesn't like a half off sale? The next one was 100% for 5 years and then down to 50% for 5 years. And then the next thing I considered was going down by 10% a year from 100% over the 10-year period. Yeah. But then those are all different money amounts for them, and I didn't understand that impact, and I didn't understand what it meant for taxes. So
yeah, exactly. I think that might be a little bit, it's complicated. So I would like to hear from council, but I'm definitely considering a friendly amendment that changes the amount. And I just would like to say too that while this is new to us, this is not a new concept. And if we were to do a percentage, I expect we may even be able to come back to them at a later date and say it would be 100%, because that's often the norm in other municipalities. Now, if we go the route of creating a subclass for rental properties at a reduced rate, then it's basically coming in at some percentage, right? As far as the amount that is picked up by the rest of the community, I don't think of it as a benefit to the proponent as much as the costs of encouraging rental. And having these 59 rental units, we have whatever our roll number is, 17,000 or whatever, it's like $1 a year. Is the impact of this sort of thing. That's very rough. It could be cents, it could be a little bit more than $1, but really, it's a small amount, and we are seeking various ways that we can have our housing covered, as that's something that we need to do to maintain the character of our community. So that's I think it's an interesting conversation, and the possibility of reduced or a percentage is very much alive in my mind.
yeah, and the other thought I had too is we do want to work with the private sector rental providers, right? So how do we make sure that we are having those right relationships and sending the right signals that we're open to having these conversations? Because I think that they are far fewer than the people who are building all the rest of the stuff.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Mara.
Thank you, Mayor Palliser. I like the way you've worded this. My understanding is that if they don't get the 10 years in perpetuity, that their financing is affected 100%. And I do like that you've added some conditions, like if they want to convert within that 10 years, that they would immediately have to pay the exempted taxes back. So initially I was like, but I'm looking in favor of this motion, and I'm still would like to hear what my fellow councillors have to say.
Yeah, thank you, me too. Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you. The only thing, this, I think, more friendly amendment would be, because you have remains a long-term residential rental property. In their ask, they talked about enforcing a minimum lease term of 12 months. Do we want to capture that in there? Just basically just add after long-term rental property with a minimum of lease term of 12 months and at least 95%, just so that we stipulate.
I'll make that. So after the with in the third line, with a minimum 12-month lease, and then we'll get rid of that with and at least 95%. There you go. Thank you. Does that capture your?
Yeah, just because
I'll take that as a friendly amendment.
Just because that was part of their commitment, so I just figured we should make sure to capture that in there. Just because when we have it just as long term, that could, then there's open interpretation. I do like the idea of choosing. Which again, if we had more time, we could do this a little bit better probably, but choosing, potentially 50% or some other percentage, just because I am struggling with the community benefit aspect of it. If we're exempting taxes, I'd like to see a greater benefit. I do think this is a benefit. Then it just becomes the question of, if we didn't give them anything, are they still going to go ahead and try to make this work? They've already applied for the funding, and that sounds like the direction. So whether they get it or not, I still think they're, at this point, trying to do the purpose rental. So that teasing out that benefit part, just again, because we being asked to do it today, it makes it harder to wrap my head around that part of it. So if someone, I would be open to choosing a percentage of exemption so that they're still getting a benefit, but it's not as much of a tax burden on the rest of the community. I know it's not a lot per year, but over the 10 years, that's going to be somewhere between 230 and 250, because let's face it, taxes will fluctuate, so it can be more in the end. So yeah, that's where I'm struggling right now with this. I'm open to this, but it's just, that's where my head's at.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support a lot of these parts. Perhaps a question for you, in terms of the mechanics, say they, 5 years in, decide to condominiumize, would we be getting just the 5 years of prior tax? Because perhaps we should add an interest fee to that. And do we have a mechanism towards that? Is how we do, like $23,000 in 2023 value is very different than 5 years down the road.
It would just be the tax that had been exempted. Ms. Rogers, you had a comment on that?
I would just ask council to perhaps not go to that level of detail in this motion. This is the first time we're looking at this type of a recommendation. It will require some work on our part to understand how we can do that. And then I would see reporting back to you with details of what we can actually do and what it looks like. And I think likely a motion like this will provide
them what they need.
With them what they need with their application, and then the terms of the agreement we can figure out.
Yeah, because I was wondering actually in comment, in response to your previous note about subclass, it would be to, maybe it could be either exempt or create a subclass, but then it starts to get a little bit in the weeds. And so I think that the essence, if it was, I actually am inclined to be putting in a percentage, just so you know. I'm just wanting to hear from council, because I think that that's the way that people, I'm picking things up.
So
Councillor Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple more points towards that. If we were looking at, say, a percentage, we could, as another talking point, because they're trying to commit to 95%, we could use 95% as a number for what we would like to subsidize for their taxing. The other question, too, in response to Councillor Hillstad, where the question about the benefit to the community, part of me wonders if we could be even more prescriptive in what it is that we want for residents who are in there. So, for example, there's been conversation with remote workers. Perhaps we can sharpen up what it is that we want in there as well. Those are my thoughts at this point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ma. Councillor Graham.
I'm just struggling with the process of this. I'm very much in favor of ideas like this. The Livability Task Force is in the middle of exploring concepts just like this. I want this council to be bold. I don't want it to be reckless. And
well, okay, no, let Councillor Graham. So, Councillor McCallum, if we could limit our comments, please. Councillor Graham, if you could please proceed. And
thank you.
If you think that it's reckless, I'd like to know that.
This is basically an ask about how much funding the investors will need to put in versus how much funding CMHC will get. This project, I believe, is going to go forward with or without this decision today. There are lots of questions to be asked. Everybody has brought up great points about how this should be structured. And I think I'm in support of a lot of that debate. I really struggle with delegations coming here and then asking for a $250,000 decision in a few hours from us. I don't think that's fair. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to the taxpayers that are going to subsidize this at the end of the day. If we had fulsome thought and conversation about that, I could support these ideas, but I'm struggling with the process of how we're doing this right now.
Okay, thank you. Just speaking to your some of your concerns, the process that we have as outlined in the procedural bylaw is what we followed. It's, I think, the first time we've done this as a council. Mm-hmm. So this is a rarity.
I agree.
I do not, foresee it happening very often. There's a reason that that was put forward that majority of council accepted. So we are accepting that we are dealing with this today because there's been a decision of council to that effect. I would hesitate to call the process or the decision reckless if we put it in context or proportion to what we're dealing with. If we're talking about $23,000 a year, it's, this is a few cents a month to other taxpayers in order to have another 59 units. You indicate that you are confident that it will go ahead in any event, and you might be right. I didn't hear that same level of confidence. I heard that that was their first choice, but it makes it more tenuous, is what I heard. So I believe that some sort of support will be needed, just as we've, I think, already recognized by asking the question as to how we can incentivize purpose-built rentals, that there is some incentive needed for the private market to do so in greater volume than we've seen to date in order to meet the need of our community. So given that some incentive is likely needed, and given that we have somebody who's in front of us who's indicated that their plan becomes more tenuous if they aren't able to get some support, through a tax exemption. I don't think that it's reckless for us to deal with it given the numbers involved. So those would just be my 2 cents based on what you had provided. I see that the board has lit up again, so I'm going to move to Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, we as a council are faced with many situations where other people's timelines or other institutional timelines do not line up with our timeline, and government does not work at the speed of business most days. So I would like to put that forward. I think that stating that this whole process is reckless is a hyperbolic statement meant to incite emotion, and well done. But what I think this proposal does is, at minimum, extends capacity of rental housing to our community. And if I sit on the livability task force, it would have been great to have this in advance of then, but welcome. Like, this is life. So we as a council decided democratically with a supermajority that we were going to vote on this today, and so that is what we're going to do. A supermajority is the farthest thing from reckless I can imagine. So again, what I think this does at minimum is it provides us with rental capacity in our community. Is it affordable in terms of the provincial definition of affordable housing? No, it will not be. But not everybody is in a position to be able to buy. And so if you can't buy, your only other option is to rent or leave. And so this provides the opportunity for people who can rent to rent, and provides capacity for council or other housing partners to start building that housing that we need for lower income people. This has a belt and suspenders approach in terms of in 10 years, which they state is the length of their mortgage that they are, or loan that they're looking from CMHC, that they will have to provide those funds back to us. And I think that's incredibly responsible. I also think that if they decide, you know, he expressed that they could, if they wanted to, pay the mortgage or the loan off from CMHC quicker, and if they choose to do that and divest themselves of the property and condominiumize it, then we still get those funds back. There's nothing irresponsible about this. There is a belt and suspenders approach attached to this motion, and I thank the mayor for bringing it forward, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that, you know, it's hard to consider things that are put on your plate in a short period of time, but I think exemptions and supporting purpose-built rental actually has some history in Canmore and with council. The last 3 purpose rent buildings built in Canmore were all supported by council in some way or another. Before that, the only purpose-built rental buildings that had been built in Canmore are the 2 ones on 10th Street.
40 years.
40 years ago.
Yep.
In fact, CMHC's report on rental rates in Canmore for many years was statistically irrelevant because we didn't even have enough purpose-built rental for them to calculate our average rental rates, because most of it is privately provided, and because a typical apartment building is all owned by one person, and that's what CMHC uses to calculate what our rental rates is, and then that leads to things like our core needs income threshold, right? So we have struggled in this community. We have not seen until the last 10 years any purpose-built rental come online. And the last 3 proposals were definitely supported by council, not in this way, but in other ways.
Yep.
To see, and I really recognize too that sort of asking for this different way of support came out of their process of how they've been trying to access different lines of funding that are available for housing. And so I think that For me, I'm more comfortable with this as a result of the debate, and I really want to thank my colleagues for their robust comments and their passion.
Okay. So we've got a couple of speakers here. Then I'm going to suggest, we're just going to float out a percentage, actually, and I just would like to get some sort of feedback where we're at. So thank you for the discussion. Thank you for those comments. Councillor Mara.
Thank you, and thank you to my fellow colleagues for all the discussion. What the consequence could be if we don't move forward with this is that those 59 units will be open to the open market. So I do think there's a benefit to the community that we have many residents that can afford above market or market value, rental properties. And I see them, like as Councillor McCallum always says, Tetris, where people are moving around and moving in. And I know someone who sold their condo so that they can move into these people's other building, and because they're a one-person unit, and made room for a family in another spot. So I see it being Tetris. I do see it being a benefit to the community. I do, like I said, like the way this is worded, that if they do change their mind or find themselves in a different financial position, that we do have some come back with the money that's been put out there. So that's just my comment. I feel that I am in support of this motion.
Great, thank you. And just to make sure I understand your comment, the concern is that if it wasn't to become a purpose-built rental, it could be converted to a condominium and sold as ownership on the open market, because they're not asking or stating that they will provide below market rental.
No, and I made a mistake
Okay.
in that.
Okay.
I meant to say market.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I believe when council supported those previous projects, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, council got full report and full, all of the information that they may have required to make those decisions. And they didn't come to a delegation the morning of and request a decision later that day. Am I?
Yeah, you are correct that those were applications made in advance for parking relaxation, height variance, those sorts of things. But this situation we have is the situation we have.
Yeah, and I would think that those previous decisions were well informed, and
so I think you're still continuing to argue whether we should be dealing with this today. Okay, Councillor
On whether
McCallum.
we're voting on this today has already been made, and it has been made by a supermajority of this council. We need to move past that and discuss whether we want to approve this or not. The mayor has asked us whether we have any changes we would like to see to what's up on the board, and that is what we need to address.
Great. Thank you, Councillor McCallum. And so to your point of order, I agree that we need to keep our comments on the motion that's in front of us. Did you have anything you wanted to add in that regard?
not at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'm going to float out there a 75% reduction. And so just wanting to know if people think that's okay. They would have preferred the 100, they'd prefer something less. I just want to get a sense, and I know that this is unusual, but we're having the discussion. So Councillor Faubert, you're on the list there? Yeah.
Ditto.
Ditto? Ditto. Okay.
Thank you. That was the number I was thinking, and it had to do with that, if you went 5 years at 100% and 5 years at 50%, overall it's 75.
Right. Councillor McCallum, your thoughts?
Honestly, I think the more rules we put in place, the less viable it is for them to move forward, but
Okay, so you're inclined to just
whatever.
leave as is?
I'm actually
Okay.
at this point, whatever.
Okay.
I would not fight. I would rather see, I can have some of what I want, or I can have none of what I want, and I choose some.
Yeah, I'm bouncing between full and 75, and so interested to hear what others think. Councillor Hillstad?
With all this great discussion, which I do believe we've had some great discussion on this, I was more leaning towards 50, but I would be happy to support 75, and
Okay.
I'd even be leaning towards the full. Again, it's just wrapping my head around that benefit piece.
Right.
Again, this would more likely ensure that it becomes purpose-built rental for the foreseeable future, so that is a benefit to our community because, again, as
Yep.
has been previously stated, we don't have a lot of a purpose-built rental here, so that is a benefit to our community. Do I still worry that market forces at play will make it more luxury type units and less of, well, just more expensive than I think it might need to be, but again, we don't have control over that, so that doesn't really matter. But that is something in the back of my mind, so, but I'd be happy with 75%, and I could be convinced to go to 100.
Okay, thank you for that input. Councillor Ma?
Between 75 and 100, I could work with either of those. I think 80 is the number that resonates with me for some strange reason right now.
Okay, Councillor Mara?
Thank you. I'd be happy to go with 75%. I think it's one of those, yes, we can have all of what we want, none of what we want. This is the developer getting some of what they want, or quite 75% of what they want. And it shows that we're working with our developers, but also being responsible to our residents.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so I am going to insert a friendly amendment. Council directed administration to exempt 900 from 75% of the municipal portion of the residential property tax of 10 years, provided 900 Railway Avenue remains a long-term residential rental property with a minimum 12-month lease and at least 95% of the units rented to residents of Canmore. And in support of this exemption, administration is directed to enter into an agreement with 900 Railway Avenue principals, including terms that, 1, council will be provided an annual report on residency of tenants, and 2, if the property is ever converted to the condominiums or ever converted to condominiums, then the exempted taxes will become immediately due. We've had a robust discussion that has landed on this motion before us as it is. Would anybody else like to speak further? Councillor Hillstad.
This is just a question of clarity. Are there any other things that they could convert to that, instead of saying convert to condominiums, just basically say convert away from purpose-built rental? Because then that way, if they, I'm not sure. I did look at the land use bylaw, and I can't recall it. I looked at that last night, and I can't remember if there was, I think vacation accommodation is allowed in there, so they could technically convert to that. And with how we have it worded, there'd be a little bit of a loophole that they would, so that's what I worry about. So I think, yeah, just basically if it ever is converted, I think from purpose-built rental.
I'd say ever converted from a long-term residential rental property. Okay, yeah, thank you. I think that's greater clarity.
Just because loopholes suck, so.
Yeah. Yeah, from a long-term residential rental property. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Rental in there, long-term rental, residential, or residential rental property.
Yeah. Yeah. Good catch, thank you. Would anybody else like to, so I recognize because of the nature of this, I'm having a lot more and welcoming actually input from administration because of things that we're discussing. So Ms. Rogers, you're okay? You were going to suggest that? Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried with Councillor Graham opposed. And I believe then that brings us to the end of our agenda. Thank you everyone for some excellent discussion and you know, going through a variety of topics. And sometimes democracy is not always, or sometimes democracy is messy and we have to deal with things right away, and I appreciate that we have done so. So I will now move that we adjourn. Are all those in favor? Carried unanimously.